This week can mark a significant turning point in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man who Donald Trump's government whisked in the dead of night to El Salvador, a country which a court order blocked his deportation. The Supreme Court, for those who remember, ordered that the government facilitate his release from that prison. And only after the Supreme Court gave that order did the United States government return him back to Nashville for prosecution on charges that remain pending. But rather than let him defend himself at trial, the government is now trying to deport him once again, this time to Liberia. A judge is trying to decide whether to hold an evidentiary hearing on Thursday on those plans. And if those plans hold firm, I will be on the ground in Greenbelt, Maryland, in federal court to report on what happens, to make sure that I can continue providing live journalism on the ground. Take a moment to visit www.allrisenews.com. Your support as a subscriber helps bring me there. And take a moment to subscribe to Legal AF to make sure that you see my videos when the case comes to a head. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview of the upcoming hearing, because this isn't the first faraway country that the government is trying to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to in advance of his trial. So just as a quick review, there are multiple cases involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia right now. He is charged criminally with allegedly smuggling immigrants, and that relates to a traffic stop from 2022, where the Department of Homeland Security passed on that prosecution at the time. He didn't even get a speeding ticket. And there is a pending motion in that case over in Nashville for selective and vindictive prosecution. He's trying to dismiss that case in advance of a trial scheduled for January. Separately, the case with more recent development in Maryland is his habeas corpus case. And when he was freed from pretrial detention in the Nashville case, the government put him in immigration detention ever since, give or take a weekend where he was allowed to reunite briefly with his family. But ever since that time, for months now, Kilmar Abrego Garcia has been in immigration detention, pending possible deportation. They have tried, the federal government has tried to send him various places all over the map, starting with Uganda. They then tried to send him to Eswatini, the last absolute monarchy in Africa. They also tried to send him to Ghana. And all three of those African nations said that had to release extraordinary public statements that they did not agree to accept Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that there was not even a discussion with the U.S. government before the U.S. government released those plans. So the federal government tried again. And they said that they would try to send him this time to Liberia. And Kilmar Abrego Garcia is challenging that effort in federal court this week. And we'll see what the federal judge has to say about that. I'm going to read a bit from Kilmar Abrego Garcia's latest motion, where he talks about those plans. He writes, quote, "The government seeks to remove Abrego Garcia without due process to a distant country where he has no family, no ties, and no meaningful connection. This is part of the government's campaign of retribution to punish Abrego Garcia because he dared to vindicate his statutory and constitutional rights in this court earlier this year, after the government unlawfully removed him to El Salvador." End quote. That was his attorneys in his habeas corpus case talking about the effort to whisk him away to Liberia after 3 failed efforts to send him to other countries. By the way, at a recent hearing that I attended, there was a memorable line from Kilmar Abrego Garcia's lawyers who invoked the old baseball rule, 3 strikes, you're out. They tried to deport him to 3 other countries. And one of the points that they made during that hearing is that Kilmar Abrego Garcia agreed to allow himself to be deported to Costa Rica. because it is a human rights respecting country that has a government that has agreed they won't try to send him right back to El Salvador, where he fears persecution. His lawyers pretty much agreed in court that tomorrow, if Trump's government came tomorrow and said, we want to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia to Costa Rica, they would allow that. There would be no opposition to that. He would be on a plane, Costa Rica bound. And they say there's no lawful reason why that shouldn't happen. As a matter of fact, if the government cannot, for whatever reason, send someone to the country that they are from, in Abrego's case, El Salvador, that they're supposed to honor the other choice if there's no legal obstacle. I'm going to read a little bit from the court filing where Abrego's lawyers say just that. Quote, "This process begins with permitting the alien, in the words of the statute, to select the country of removal, subject to certain limitations if the country designated is one that is contiguous or adjacent to the United States. Quote, the Attorney General may disregard the alien's designation under 4 specified circumstances. For example, if the designated country is unwilling to accept the alien," end quote, under the words of the statute. And they, of course, say that Costa Rica has been willing to accept Abrego. They say that none of those 4 exceptions apply. And they also make the argument of, if the goal is just to send Kilmar Abrego Garcia out of the country, why is the government of the United States resisting that outcome? Why not just send him there if the goal isn't to make an example of him, to punish him on the world stage? And that is likely to be a focal point of any upcoming hearing. Now, that's another thing that is likely to be an ongoing issue is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a civil case and there is a pending criminal case. It's been noted by Abrego's lawyers that you're saying that Abrego committed these crimes of smuggling immigrants into the country. Why not defend those allegations at a trial? Why not allow the trial to run its course rather than whisk him out of the country before it can go to a head early next year in January? That is likely to be a focal point. And the way to really understand the many twists and turns of this case is with live reporting on the ground. That's why I'm going to Greenbelt, Maryland this week, and also to Alexandria, Virginia, to cover the case of James Comey. Some of the folks watching right now might have seen my conversation with Michael Popak the last time we discussed a development in the cases of James Comey and Letitia James from Alexandria, Virginia, in the challenge over the legitimacy of prosecutor Lindsay Halligan's appointment. I'll be back in federal court in Virginia this week for the next development in James Comey case, where a magistrate judge hears other pretrial motions for the dismissal of that case. Later in the week, if the judge confirms the hearing that has been tentatively scheduled in Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, I'll be on the ground the next day, Thursday, in Greenbelt, Maryland, federal court right there, to report on those proceedings. And then on Friday, I'll be on the ground in that same courthouse for the first initial pretrial conference in the case of John Bolton. Live coverage of the courtrooms is so essential. And if you want to make sure that I can keep doing the work that I do and that you don't miss my reporting, visit www.allrisenews.com. That's www.allrisenews.com. If you become a paid subscriber, that's how I travel across the country, whether it's Nashville, Virginia, or Maryland, or elsewhere, to get the live coverage that really makes these cases come to life. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss the next video, make sure that you're subscribed to the Legal AF YouTube channel by clicking subscribe right now. See you later in the week.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.